The first general election under the premiership of Akintola took place on 8th August 1960. The AG did exceedingly well at the election. For the first time, the party won 50% of the seats in the Midwest zone of the region, now known as Bendel State. This is huge because back in the early 50s, the NCNC controlled more than 70% of the seats in the Midwest, right? So we're talking 21 out of 24. So that's 1/8. That's 7/8. Right? That's 7/8 of all the people in that axis, right? So this is the first time they're having 50%, and it was a huge stuff. As SLA had no stomach for the non-Yoruba elements of the region and had never previously done any political work or campaigning in the area, I took charge of the Midwest before and during the electioneering campaign. It was agreed before polling day that after the close of polls, Akintola would come to my house so that we might hear the results together. I expected him, but he did not turn up. About 10 o'clock that night, he rang up from Ogumosho to say that some Osun leaders insisted on staying with him in his house at Ogumosho to listen to the results. However, he would come the following day for lunch. I should expect him about 12 noon. It was the incurable habit of SLA to be late for any appointment. Once we were invited to dinner at Government House by Sir John Rankin, Governor of the Western Region. SLA was then the AG leader of opposition in the House of Representatives. We had just finished the last course of a 4-course meal when he arrived, so I did not expect him to arrive until 2 p.m., giving him 2 hours of grace. He actually turned up about 2:30. He was full of apologies. In the morning, he explained, a large crowd had suddenly swooped upon him at Ogumosho and insisted on going to Ibadan with him in a motorcade. And at the approaches to Ibadan, another large crowd had waited to give him a triumphant welcome to Ibadan. I thought it was odd that a triumphant entry into Ibadan could be arranged for him by members of the party without my knowledge. I should be the one to lead the victory procession with him on my side. Surely that would have been more impressive. He assured me that all the arrangements at Ogumosho and Ibadan had been made without his previous knowledge. SLA sat down as if to have a meal, but instead he said that he was in a hurry to keep an appointment with the governor for 2 o'clock. I expressed surprise and the hope that he was not being invited to form a new government. Oh no, he said. The governor, Sir Adesoji Aderemi, the then Ooni of Ife, had rung up very early in the morning to congratulate him and to request that on his arrival in Ibadan, he might call so that he, the governor, might congratulate him in person. At that time, he had thought he would be with me even before 12 noon, and that after lunch, he would call on the governor. He therefore gave him 2 o'clock, which was agreed. So, hurriedly, he left my place. At the 3 o'clock news, Amagbo. So he said he was going to see Oni, who was the governor of the Western region, where he was in Ibadan. I was going to go see him, right? And that's the reason he was not staying in Papa's house, because he had to, run along. Anyway, so hurriedly, he left my place. At the 3 o'clock news on the NBC, Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, it was announced that Chief SL Akintola had visited the governor and that the latter had called upon him to form a new government. It was an established practice in the AG for the leader of the party, after a general election, to summon a meeting of the caucus of party leaders to consider and approve the names of persons recommended for appointment as ministers. This was done when I was leader of the party in power and premier in 1951 and 1956 respectively. In those days, when a premier was called upon to form a new government, all the incumbent ministers were deemed, from the moment the announcement was made, to have surrendered their respective portfolios and vacated their ministries in order to prevent a vacuum. What I did in 1956 after the general election was to meet with the party caucus, which included Akintola, for a consideration and approval of my nominees for ministerial appointments. After this had been done, I then went to the governor to request him to call upon me to form a new government. And immediately he did so, I submitted the names of my ministers to him, who were immediately appointed. In other words, there is a process before you form the government, which would include having the people that you want to serve with you as ministers. And then even that would be determined by the party caucus, and then there will be no vacuum, right, in the transition of power, right? So he says that's what they usually did in the AG. However, in the present case, The caucus had not even been assembled nor summoned to meet. It was clear that Akintola had hurried out of my presence so that we might not hear the 3 o'clock news together. It was undeniably clear that he had visited the governor and given him a list of his ministers before coming to my place. And I had no doubt that both the Ogumosho and Ibadan processions had been carefully planned with his full knowledge and consent. He did not want me around because my presence might steal the show. He called on me the following day in the afternoon, but again he was in a hurry to go back to his house to receive the commissioner of police. Why did he not finish with the commissioner before coming to me? The answer was that he had other important engagements for the rest of the day, but felt obliged to call on me to explain what had happened the previous day. He explained that he had not previously asked the governor to call upon him to form a new government. But when he was at the government house for the prearranged courtesy visit, the governor said he wanted to call upon him to form a new government. As he did not want to appear to be rude, he agreed. I told him to tell that story to the Marines. He had made a serious and very reprehensible departure from party procedure of holding proper detailed consultations with certain party leaders before tendering advice to the governor to invite him to form a new government. Besides, I thought he had deliberately deceived me all the way. He apologized profusely. This was on 10th August 1960. That's about 7 months after I became premier. In the meantime, on hearing the news on 9th August 1960, I had summoned a meeting of the caucus for 9 a.m. on the 11th. I told SLA of this and he agreed. So you're already seeing some of the intrigues. So Papa says, in the meantime, on hearing the news on 9th August 1960, I had summoned a meeting of the caucus for 9 a.m. on the 11th. I told SLA of this and he agreed. He, however, gave me one of the shocks of my life when he informed me that in order to prevent a vacuum in the administration, he had already submitted to the governor a list of the new ministers, that he had in fact informed the ministers concerned, and that subject to the approval of the caucus, the ministers might be sworn in later on the morning of 11th August. It then dawned on me that SLA was determined to run the show alone, regardless of accepted party conventions and procedure. I felt, therefore, that in the prevailing circumstances, the best attitude to adopt was to allow him to have his way in matters of conventions and procedure. Accordingly, I told him that after the swearing-in ceremony, I would like all the new ministers to retire to my house so that I might congratulate them and give them a brief outline of our code of conduct. The following day, SLA arrived at the meeting about 9:30. Those present apart from SLA himself were Chief Anthony Naoro, Chief Ayotunde Rosiji, Mr. Alfred Rwani, Chief S.O. Gbadamosi, and Chief S.O. Shonibare. Akintola submitted a list of his ministers. It was a tumultuous crowd. There were objections to the number, but whom to take out? An exercise in this connection was bound to create bad blood, since according to SLA, those concerned had been informed contrary to previous practice. Ministers were usually informed after their nomination had been approved by the caucus. The situation in which we found ourselves gave the opportunity to some members to add 2 or 3 other nominees. As far as SLA was concerned, the number did not matter. I then suggested that in order to have a manageable crowd at the cabinet meeting, he could divide the ministers into 2 groups, some of cabinet rank, others of non-cabinet rank. After some discussion, we agreed to this arrangement. But after a short while, indeed within the week, this decision was revoked. Akintola had informed those that were excluded from cabinet meetings that the caucus and I had been responsible for the discrimination against them. I convened another meeting. There, he declared that the number of ministers at cabinet meeting did not at all matter to him, and he emphasized this point by asserting, the more, the merrier. So we all succumbed, and SLA became the undisputed hero of his incumbent ministers and of new aspirants as well. After the swearing-in ceremony, the ministers retired to my place as arranged. Those who attended the caucus meeting earlier in the morning were still with me. From this point, I would like to allow the records which I kept from time to time as the events took place to speak for themselves, interspersed with comments where necessary. We're about to dive into Papa's diary. I hope we are ready.